I'd already completed my external walk round and mag checks, so that only left my pre-takeoff check still to do. Choke fully off, fuel pressure good, cylinder head and water temperatures both good, master switches both on, all good, so ready to go. This was 24 Zulu November's first flight since it had given me a scare with a major power loss right after takeoff. I think the problem was fuel related, and since then I'd been over the complete fuel system with a fine-tooth comb and replaced almost all of it. So now was the time to see if I'd cured the problem. There's no safe area straight ahead for an emergency landing, so as I climbed out, I turned towards some suitable open areas off to the right, where I could land if I had to. As any problems, if they did arise, would most likely occur early on. My idea was then to stay close to Malbec, so I could land back if need be, by making a continuous climbing turn until I arrived back overhead at around 2,000 feet, the height at which I intended to fly my planned route. Time to ease back the throttle, to ease the stress on the engine after the climb, and allow it to cool down a bit before arriving in Malbec's overhead, luckily without any incident. I'd planned was a counterclockwise flight around Périgueux, and the first leg was to the north to bring me to the east of the city. As I started on this leg, I passed by the commune of Plazac with its distinctive church tower off to my right. The next big ground feature was the road heading out to the west from Rouffignac towards Vert and Bergerac, which I crossed while continuing northwards. Shortly after that, the main east-west autoroute from Brive to Bordeaux came into view. That, I had to turn left onto roughly a northwesterly heading to take me around towards the north of Périgueux, with Périgueux-Bassillac Airport off to my left. The ground I was passing over, mainly low rolling hills and trees, was fairly featureless except for a few brightly coloured rock quarries. There were few open spaces amongst the trees, and it would have been an inhospitable area for a false landing, so I was glad that the engine continued to run smoothly. As I flew on, the scenery below began to change as the ground became a bit flatter. Now there were some much larger clear areas with more villages and small towns, but the visibility ahead was hampered rather by the sun getting lower and its rays being scattered by the marks and irregularities in 240 November's windshield. A few minutes later, I took a couple of photographs of Bassillac as I flew by. Not much to see because I was too far away to catch any details. The ground became flatter and much more open as I approached the area to the north of Périgueux. As I didn't intend to fly any closer to it, now was a good time to take a few photographs of the city, although I've got much better ones from my previous flights in my Savannah. I was now only a few minutes away from the point to the north of Périgueux at which I intended to begin a left turn to take me around to the west of the city, so more or less halfway through the planned flight. I hadn't noticed at the time that 240 November's engine was already beginning to run a bit more unevenly than before, and even if I had done, I would probably have just put it down to bumpiness in the air or something like that. But that's when I got my new engine surprise. Watch the rev counter as suddenly, almost without warning, the engine speed drops by something like 600 to 800 revs. It only lasted for a few seconds, but it got me thinking about what to do. There were a few open fields below where I could have probably landed safely if I'd had to, but after the rev drop, the engine seemed to be running okay. So the best option was to think about the quickest way to get back to Malbec, and as by now I was about halfway through the planned flight, that was to continue on, but with corners being cut as much as possible. I figured that the symptoms were typical of engine icing when a piece of ice falls from the carburetor inlet walls and enters the cylinders. So I continued onwards, with the small town of Saint-Astier on the west bank of the river Isle coming up on my left. I took a couple of shots of the town, which is very pretty at ground level, as I flew by. Shortly after that I was again approaching the Brive-Bordeaux autoroute, but this time from the north. After crossing it, I could then turn left onto a roughly southeasterly heading that would take me directly back to join a long final approach to land at Malbec. First, the commune of Monzac-Sylvan came up on my nose. Then the town of Verte. The ground between Verte and Malbec mainly then comprised tree-covered low hills interspersed with a patchwork of agriculture and farms. It was actually 20 minutes or more before I intersected Malbec's extended centre line and could commence a left turn for a long final approach. Malbec is at around 500 feet ASL and only has a short runway 160 metres in length. There is a precisely defined landing area marked by arrows, and if you touch down before them, you'll have a good chance of either damaging your undercarriage in an extreme case or bouncing. It has a slight upslope of about 7%, and there's definitely no go-around below 1 to 200 feet AGL. There are two requirements for a successful landing. The first is a stabilised approach, and the best way to achieve that is to set up a steady airspeed and descent rate as far out from the runway as you are comfortable with. The second is to be confident with flying your aircraft at a very low altitude of around a metre or so. When I was tested for my French licence, even though I already had 2 UK ones, Francis, the excellent French instructor, made me fly an approach without touching down for the length of the runway at a height of a metre. Now I understand why. Almost all of the off-airfield runways in this area are sloping, and to land on them successfully you have to be confident in your judgment of height, especially in the flare. If you get it wrong and land hard, you can break your undercarriage, which I admit to having done. So after a long, stabilised final approach, it was just a matter of hitting the exact landing spot at the right speed. Without making a big deal out of it, this is tricky for the first few times, but like all things, you get used to it. On this occasion, even though I landed a little bit hot and a bit beyond the marked landing area, you can see how because of the runway slope, I still needed to put in engine power to get to the top of the runway to park and stop the engine. And there was no repeat of the engine problem, as I expected there wouldn't be. So icing? I still think so. Thanks for joining me on the flight, and I hope to see you again on the next one.